Yeah, so this is the pitch or the idea behind the reading product. Um, so I used to be a teacher at a school, and I used to teach English, and um, I used to, and basically one thing I really strongly believed, um, and I think like I still continue to believe that basically, okay, this can be a long video, it's fine. Uh, in an English class, when you're teaching kind of the regular material, it was really hard to engage all the kids at the same time. It was really hard, and I only had 20 kids. It wasn't 40. Uh, but even then, because children have different reading levels, to engage everyone with the same kind of content was incredibly difficult. And so one thing that I started doing was actually having the kids just read their own books during class. So uh, whatever, I split the thing up into like reading, like, reading, writing, listening, speaking. And then for the reading section, so 25% of the total class time, all the kids would do is just go read a book, right? And the way that I set that up was we would go to the library, and then basically I would talk to kids about what books they'd read before and what they liked, and this kind of stuff. And then I would have them pick a book, and then they would pick that book, and then that's what they would read. And once they were done, they would come back to me and tell me how they liked it, how they didn't like it, whatever. And then I would recommend another book for them, and that's kind of how it went. What I was able to do this way is actually like you can now change the kind of level of kind of complexity that children are reading at, and so you can get almost like even then 100% is hard, but you can get a lot more engagement than you can get when you're just reading some kind of like blank whatever, like same text for everyone. Um, the problem was, so one problem was this, right? That this was kind of quite time consuming and non-intuitive. What we did have at our disposal was a very decent library, and I had read a lot of these books, and so often, that was like a big thing. Just my time was a kind of a constraint. The other problem was actually there was no cross batch carryover of information. So the books that those children read were not really captured anywhere. And then, so when I started teaching this grade, I didn't get, reports saying, "Hey, these kids are at this level; they're reading this kind of stuff," and so there was no kind of school program for teaching or for reading, right? That carried over with the student through kind of all their different grades and kind of took them all the way to university. And what the school was doing was like it was incredible. Like we had money, but we couldn't actually even figure out what books to buy because they're concerned. Some people don't want their kids to be exposed to certain kinds of content. There's different kinds of concerns there, and just knowing what kind of books to buy that are going to be the kids are going to like, that they're going to appreciate, that they're going to read, right? And then so that's kind of on the acquisition of the book side. But then even on the student kind of, how do you actually help the kids find the book that they're interested in, and how do you basically build reading as a habit, right? It was incredibly hard, and there was no cross, like, through how do you develop someone from the time that they're very young to being like a reader, right? So that by the time they come out of university or come out of high school, they're like a well-read person. They have like some breadth of knowledge and enjoy reading and that kind of stuff, right? There was no kind of good solution for all of that. And essentially what you need is people who've read a lot, and people who can talk to the kids, understand what they like, what they don't like, understand where their vocabulary is, where their reading level is, and then be able to recommend books, and then have the kids read those books and then get feedback from the kids on how they liked it, whether it was too hard for them, whether they being adequately challenged in terms of building their vocabulary and kind of their, the complexity of the text they're consuming. And so taking all of that back, and then recommending the next book, right? And doing it in a way, over a period of whatever 10 years that you have the kids, in such a way that not only like one kind of thing that was happening was everybody was just reading this, like, I think Geronimo Stilton or something like that. And so what will happen is there'll be like this um, some kind of books will become very trendy, and sometimes what will happen is uh, kids will just keep reading that, and so there's no kind of expose a little bit of literature, a little bit of history, all of this stuff. And so how do you do that? The reason I think so that's the problem. The reason I think it's a really important problem is, or really kind of interesting problem to think about, is because if you can turn people into good readers, like I don't think you actually need to teach them anything else. So much knowledge is contained in books, and that if you can help people find the kind of stuff they're interested in, they can learn anything just by reading books. And so it's not an immediate kind of payback. It'll take 10, 15 years to have one, like if you get kids right in the beginning, for them to graduate and then go off and perhaps do something. It'll take a little bit of time for the effects to show up, but really, if you can turn people into readers, you're unlocking all of human knowledge, right? If you just have people who are, and again, nothing wrong with Instagram, nothing wrong with reading whatever else, but all human knowledge is locked up in books. And so I think one part of, and there's different, okay, so we'll talk about more, okay, so that's the problem, right? And why the problem I think is important and worth solving. So the solution, right? So let's talk about that a little bit. So the ideal solution is every kid has, there's one mythical kind of all completely well-read person, right? Who can speak to kids, who can understand what they want, who can help them kind of on their reading journey, and can recommend books, has kind of is what's the thing for knows everything, whatever, omniscient, this omniscient kind of reader who can help you along in your reading journey. Let's say you like gardening, they can give you instruction manuals and books and maybe Gerald, what's the guy who, whatever, I forget the name, who lives on the Greek islands and raises that tortoise Achilles and that kind of stuff. But yeah, basically you need someone who's really well read, who can sit with you, watch you read, help you understand the words you don't understand, change the books when it's too hard for you, and just like have a personal kind of reading assistant, right? Who knows everything about books and can just help you. So and ideally every child has that, right? So the idea is, obviously it's really hard to find people who've read that much, and then how do you scale, whatever. So that's kind of maybe the ideal solution, right? And so obviously that seems kind of impossible. And so what you could do instead is just have people, you could kind of centralize this program, right? Instead of leaving it on each class teacher to recommend books and do this kind of discovery process with children to understand where they are, and then recommend them and then iterate on that. What you could do is kind of launch like a school-wide reading program. And so what you do is from the very time a child becomes able to read their, whatever kind of books, whatever kind of thing they're at, that you're always working with them and kind of tracking them through school. And so making sure by the time they kind of maybe graduate school or maybe even beyond, they're well read, they have like a broad kind of knowledge, broad base of knowledge, and are doing it in a way that children are super engaged and just like developing this love of reading. So if you can do it for one school, and so how do you do it? One way would be to just like mail them books. So when I was young, Scholastic used to have these book fairs, and you get this form and you would pick your books, and then they would send you the books in school, which was fantastic. It was such a great day when those books would come in. It's like Christmas, and it was great, but not everyone could afford them. Not everyone could afford the number of books that they wanted, and so that was an issue. So one way definitely would be to mail books back and forth. I think certainly for an early version, you could try something like that. Even then, you'd have to have a pretty well-stocked library to be able to do that. And frequently you're going to want some common set of books that are more whatever thing. So that's one way. Maybe just North America, you just don't even worry about mailing back and forth. You just like send them books, right? And then they're also building up their own library, but that seems kind of not ideal for the Indian scenario, and also kind of perhaps wasteful. Not maybe the most efficient use of resources. So I was thinking what you could do is actually use some kind of Kindle-esque reader. And so you send them a reader, and then you ask them some questions, you send them a reader, and then you send them a book. And then through the reader, if you're getting analytics on how they're reading the book, you can give them instructions like, hey, whatever, like give them like a reading program. So incorporate things like, atomic habits and the power of habits and how do you build like a reading habit. So build that into the program as well. But then see how quickly are they moving through the book? Are they engaged? Are they enjoying it? Where are they? You could give them some instruction. Like if you don't understand a word, please double click on highlight the word, see the meaning, and then you can get a sense of where the vocabulary is. So yeah, some kind of digital solution would be great, because then you could get lots of analytics. The cost would go down. It'd be a one-time cost to the device. I've owned a Kindle since 2011 or something, and it still works. So those do have fairly long life. You can't really use them for anything else other than reading. So that's great as well. And then, so you could get analytics on how kids are doing, and then you could kind of figure out what to do on the basis of that. You could do things like take kind of more advanced books and then actually make them simpler to consume. So you could just kind of be like, hey, like whatever, like if you have some gradation of the difficulty of words, you could take all those words and just replace them with some synonym that was perhaps at a lower reading level to make the books more accessible. You could take nonfiction books, so something like nonviolent communication, you could take and actually make it much easier and much more. You could write simpler versions of useful books for kids, depending on their age level. And once you have this, you could do something like, hey, like, this child is really enjoying this book, the genre, but struggling with the words. Okay, like they've read chapter 1. All right, let's just go and change the rest of the chapters so that it becomes easier. And basically what you can do is dynamic book text generation in order to kind of make it easier for them to read. It's not like, one kind of example from my life is I read this book. I had one phase, and then also just generally all these good reading habits, right? Like there's this one thing about, one thing that I struggled with at some point was I read this book. I used to think you had to finish every book you read, which I don't agree with at all anymore. But then I read this book and it was really long and it was really painful, but I forced myself to get through it. It was called the Jeffrey Archer book, who I otherwise love. But whatever, it was As the Crow Flies. And so I read this book and it was torture for me, and I didn't read for like a few years after, right? And so you can catch things like that when they happen. When kids stop reading, maybe you can send like a gentle little nudge. You can do it through the school or through the parents, however you want to do that. Parents can have control over what kind of, or have some, control is maybe a strong word, but some kind of influence over what their kid reads, what kind of themes they're exposed to. So hopefully that kind of thing can be taken care of. Same too with the school. Of course, there's a risk here that if you manage to centralize this and actually, someone pointed this out to me, basically you can have a huge effect on people's kind of thing. If you're controlling all the text that they're reading, you can kind of get them to think in any way you want. That's true, but right now we're just leaving it up to fate and Instagram algorithms. So I don't think I think we could certainly make an improvement on that. And so, yes, understood that that's a risk, but also I think that's a price. And we're not managing that risk in the current scenario anyway. So that's the idea. The idea is to turn everyone into readers, have everyone exposed to literature, have like a personalized reading program for everyone, just everyone. And then all these kind of schools that are struggling with library programs and things like that, we can turn it into something that can replace those. I don't know what else to say. Like there's a huge TAM, obviously, like pretty much everyone can do this, all kids. And imagine what it would be like if 30 years from now, everyone in this country is well read and had exposure to all of this knowledge that we have accumulated as a species. It's just locked away and inaccessible. It's not even locked away, it's just inaccessible because we haven't done enough to inculcate that habit and that reading, right? So that's one idea. I think that's good. Let's stop now.